The vampire prince had lived for 300 years without loving anyone, but the night a poor maid entered his forbidden room and covered him with her only coat, something ancient inside him finally opened its eyes. Emily Carter had been warned about the west wing of Blackthorne Castle on her first day. Never enter after midnight. Never touch the locked doors. And above all, never disturb Prince Adrian Blackwood. The other maids whispered his name as if the stone walls might carry it back to him. Emily had no interest in princes, vampire, or otherwise. She was 24, 6 weeks behind on rent, and had exactly $11 in her bank account. Royal mysteries did not pay overdue bills. So she kept her head down, polished silver, carried linens, and tried not to stare at the pale figures who moved through the castle with impossible silence. Then, at 12:17 a.m., Emily heard glass break behind the forbidden library door. She stopped. The hallway stretched nearly 60 feet in both directions, empty beneath rows of dim candles. Rain pressed against the tall windows. Thunder rolled over the mountains. Emily tightened her fingers around her cleaning cloth. "Keep walking," she told herself. Instead, she opened the door. The library was colder than the hallway. Thousands of books climbed toward a ceiling lost in darkness. A dead fireplace stood at the far end of the room, and beside it sat a man in a black chair. Emily froze. Prince Adrian. Even motionless, he seemed to command the shadows around him. Black hair fell across his forehead. His face was unnaturally pale, whiter than Emily's skin, sharp and still as carved marble. His eyes were closed. One hand rested against the chair. A crystal glass lay broken on the floor several feet away. Emily's heartbeat quickened. She should leave. Every servant in Blackthorne knew that. But then she noticed the cold. The fireplace had gone dark. Adrian wore only a thin black shirt, and for one foolish second, he did not look like the terrifying heir to an ancient vampire throne. He looked tired. Alone. Emily glanced toward the door. Then she slowly removed her worn brown coat. It was cheap, faded at the sleeves, and the only warm thing she owned. She stepped closer. 5 feet. 3. 1. Her hands trembled as she carefully laid the coat across Adrian's shoulders. "No one should be this cold alone," she whispered. Then she turned and hurried from the room. The door clicked shut. Silence returned. For 3 long seconds, nothing moved. Then Prince Adrian Blackwood opened his silver eyes. He had been awake the entire time. Vampires did not need human sleep, and Adrian had not closed his eyes in nearly 2 centuries. Slowly, he looked down at the faded coat resting across his shoulders. It smelled faintly of rain and lavender soap. Warmth still clung to the fabric. Human warmth. Adrian's expression hardened. Hundreds had entered this castle seeking his favor. Noblewomen had offered alliances. Vampire houses had offered fortunes. Servants obeyed him because they feared him. Yet this human girl had believed him asleep. She had expected nothing. Asked for nothing. She had simply noticed the cold. Adrian rose from the chair and walked to the window. Far below, Emily crossed the servants' courtyard through the rain, hugging her arms around herself because she no longer had a coat. Adrian watched until she disappeared into the eastern wing. Then his fingers tightened around the worn fabric. "Emily Carter," he said softly, testing the name he had read on the new servant registry that morning. For the first time in 300 years, the vampire prince found himself wondering where one human girl would be tomorrow night. By sunrise, Prince Adrian Blackwood had learned 17 things about Emily Carter, and none of them explained why her worn brown coat was still folded on the corner of his desk. She was 24. She had arrived at Blackthorne Castle 11 days earlier. She rented a small room above a bakery in the village, sent part of every paycheck toward her late father's debts, and had never once requested an advance. Ordinary facts. Adrian had studied kings, traders, and entire bloodlines with less attention. Yet at 6:30 that evening, he stood behind the dark glass of the upper gallery and watched Emily enter the servants' dining hall. She looked tired. Her chestnut hair was pinned back imperfectly, and without her coat, she kept rubbing warmth into her hands. Adrian's jaw tightened. Ridiculous. He had not asked for her kindness. He certainly had not asked her to walk through the rain without protection. Below, Emily collected her dinner. Bread, soup, and half an apple. She had barely sat down when an elderly servant named Martha entered carrying a basket of linens. The woman moved slowly, her shoulders bent with exhaustion. Emily looked at her own tray. Then at Martha. Adrian watched Emily stand, cross the room, and place her bowl of soup in front of the older woman. Martha protested. Emily smiled. I had a late lunch. Adrian heard the lie from 40 feet above. Her heartbeat changed when she said it. Not much. Just enough. He remained there as Emily returned to her seat and ate only the bread and apple. The next night, he saw her kneeling beside a young kitchen maid named Lucy, quietly repairing a torn uniform sleeve with blue thread because it was the only color available. The night after that, Emily accepted blame for a silver tray left in the east corridor. Adrian knew she had not left it there. He had watched another maid do it. Why? Adrian asked later. Emily nearly dropped the stack of towels in her arms. She turned. He stood 10 feet away, dressed in black, his pale face unreadable beneath the candlelight. Your Highness. Her pulse jumped. Adrian heard every beat. Why did you accept blame for something you did not do? Emily hesitated. Lucy has 3 warnings. I have none. That does not answer my question. It does to me. Adrian studied her. Humans usually filled silence when frightened. Emily did not. She simply held the towels and waited. You gave Martha your dinner 3 nights ago. Emily's eyes widened. You repaired Lucy's uniform yesterday. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion. Do you watch all the maids this closely? The question escaped before she could stop it. Adrian went perfectly still. Emily turned pale. I apologize. That was inappropriate. Yes. Adrian stepped closer. It was. Emily lowered her eyes. For reasons he could not explain, Adrian disliked that immediately. Look at me. She did. Brown eyes. Human eyes. Warm and uncertain, but honest. Why do you help them? He asked. Emily frowned slightly. Because they needed help. And what do you receive? Nothing. Then it is a poor transaction. Something softened in her face. Not everything is a transaction, Your Highness. Adrian had lived for 317 years. He had watched nations trade peace for land, families trade loyalty for wealth, and friends trade secrets for survival. Everything had a price. Everyone wanted something. Yet Emily Carter stood before him in a faded maid's uniform and looked at him as though he were the one who did not understand the world. Footsteps approached from the grand staircase. Emily quickly moved aside. I should return these towels. Adrian said nothing. She walked past him, then stopped. Your Highness? He turned. Did you sleep better? Adrian's silver eyes narrowed. Emily glanced away, embarrassed. The other night. In the library. Silence. She still believed he had been asleep. Yes, Adrian said slowly. Much better. Emily smiled. Just once. Then she disappeared around the corner. Adrian remained motionless in the hallway. Behind him, his royal advisor emerged from the shadows. You lied to her, Lord Sebastian said. Adrian looked toward the empty corridor. I know. Sebastian studied the prince carefully. You have never lied to protect a human from embarrassment. Adrian's expression turned cold. Choose your next words wisely. Sebastian bowed and walked away. But Adrian stayed where he was, listening to Emily's fading footsteps until even his supernatural hearing could no longer find them. 3 nights later, Emily Carter learned that silence could become dangerous when an entire ballroom was waiting for one poor maid to kneel. Blackthorne Castle glittered beneath 1,000 candles for the winter court gathering, and Emily had spent 6 hours carrying silver trays between guests whose jewelry could have paid her rent for a lifetime. Vampire nobles filled the grand hall in black, crimson, and deep blue. They moved with perfect grace. They spoke softly. They watched everything. Emily focused on her work. 1 glass at a time. 1 table at a time. Do not trip. Do not stare. Do not attract attention. She was placing a crystal glass beside Lady Victoria Ravenscroft when the noblewoman suddenly moved her arm. Emily felt the impact against her tray. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth. The ballroom went quiet. Emily stared at the stain. Lady Victoria slowly turned toward her. She was beautiful in a cold, polished way, with golden hair and porcelain skin. How unfortunate, Victoria said. Emily immediately set down the tray. I apologize, my lady. I will replace the cloth. Kneel. Emily stopped. Around them, conversations faded completely. Excuse me? Victoria smiled. You heard me. Emily felt hundreds of eyes settle on her. At the far end of the ballroom, Prince Adrian stood beside Lord Sebastian. His silver gaze shifted toward the table. Kneel and apologize properly, Victoria said. Emily's hands began to tremble. She pressed them together. She needed this job. She needed every paycheck. $11 in her bank account had become $7 after breakfast and bus fare. Losing Blackthorne Castle meant losing her room above the bakery before the end of the month. I am sorry about the wine, Emily said carefully. Victoria's smile disappeared. Then kneel. Adrian heard Emily's heartbeat from across the ballroom. Fast. Frightened. But she remained standing. Something inside him sharpened. Emily looked at the marble floor. For one terrible second, she considered it. Just bend your knees. Keep the job. Survive. She had swallowed pride before. She had apologized to landlords who ignored broken heaters. She had smiled at customers who treated her like furniture. Survival demanded compromises. But this was different. Emily lifted her head. You may dismiss me, my lady. A quiet breath moved through the room. Victoria stared at her. Emily's voice trembled, but she continued. You may report me. You may take my wages for the damaged tablecloth. Her fingers tightened against her skirt. But you do not own my dignity. Silence. Complete. Absolute. Emily immediately wondered if she had just destroyed her entire life. Then a sound came from the far end of the ballroom. Soft. Almost impossible. Prince Adrian Blackwood laughed. Not loudly. Just one brief breath of genuine amusement. Every vampire in the room turned toward him. Lord Sebastian looked as if the castle ceiling had vanished. Adrian had not laughed at a royal gathering in 86 years. He walked forward. The crowd separated without being asked. Emily watched him approach, her heart beating harder with every measured step. Adrian stopped beside her. His pale face was calm. Too calm. Lady Victoria, he said. Victoria straightened. Your Highness, this servant insulted me. I heard. Emily swallowed. Victoria smiled with satisfaction. Adrian looked at the stained tablecloth. Then at the position of Victoria's chair. Then at the glass. His silver eyes returned to the noblewoman. You moved your arm 3 inches to the left. Victoria's smile froze. I do not understand. I do. Adrian's voice became quiet. I was watching. Emily looked at him. Adrian did not meet her eyes. Not yet. The maid did not spill your wine, he continued. You caused the accident. A whisper traveled through the ballroom. Victoria's porcelain face hardened. You would question my word for a human servant? Adrian finally looked at Emily. He saw fear in her eyes. And exhaustion. And something stronger than both. Pride without arrogance. Dignity without power. For 317 years, Adrian had watched people kneel before crowns they secretly hated. Emily Carter had nearly nothing, yet she had protected the one thing no fortune could restore once surrendered. He turned back to Victoria. No, Adrian said. I question your word because you lied. Victoria rose from her chair. She is a maid. Adrian's gaze cooled. I am aware. Then why do you care? The question remained between them. Emily stopped breathing. Lord Sebastian lowered his eyes. Adrian should have answered immediately. Instead, the vampire prince looked at the poor human girl standing beside him and discovered, with sudden unease, that he did not know the answer. Adrian's silence lasted only 4 seconds, but in a room filled with creatures who could hear a heartbeat across 50 feet, 4 seconds was an eternity. Lady Victoria noticed. Lord Sebastian noticed. Emily noticed most of all. Why do you care? Victoria repeated. Adrian's silver eyes remained on Emily. He could have offered a political answer. Fairness. Royal discipline. The dignity of Blackthorne Castle. He had used such words for centuries, elegant shields built to hide inconvenient truths. But tonight, every answer felt dishonest. The gathering is over, Adrian said. Victoria stared at him. Adrian. You heard me. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The candles along the walls flickered as hundreds of guests exchanged uncertain glances. Emily stood perfectly still. She had expected punishment. Dismissal. Perhaps a final paycheck if the castle administrator felt generous. She had not expected an entire royal gathering to end around her. Victoria stepped closer to Adrian. Your father will hear about this. My father hears about everything. You are embarrassing your house for a servant. Adrian finally looked at her. The temperature in the ballroom seemed to fall. Careful, Victoria. One word. One warning. Victoria's expression tightened. Then she turned toward Emily. Pack your belongings. You will leave Blackthorne before sunrise. Emily's stomach dropped. There it was. The consequence she had been waiting for. $7. No savings. No job. No coat. She forced herself to breathe. Yes, my lady. No. Adrian's voice stopped the room again. Emily slowly turned toward him. Victoria looked almost amused. No. Adrian stepped between them. She stays. You do not manage the servants. I do tonight. Lord Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. Emily wondered if everyone in the castle had suddenly lost their minds. Victoria gave a cold laugh. The Prince of Blackthorne does not interfere in servant disputes. Adrian's gaze shifted to Emily. She was trying to appear calm, but he heard the frightened rhythm of her heart. He remembered her walking through the rain without a coat because she had given hers to him. He remembered the untouched soup. The blue thread in Lucy's sleeve. Her quiet words in the corridor. Not everything is a transaction. Then tonight, Adrian said, I break the rule. Victoria's face went still. The ballroom emptied quickly after that. No one argued. No one wanted to be the last person standing between Adrian and the door. Within 20 minutes, the great hall was silent except for servants clearing glasses. Emily worked beside them until Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper, gently removed a tray from her hands. "Go," the older woman whispered. "Before something else happens." Emily did not need convincing. She crossed the eastern corridor and pushed through a side door into the servants' courtyard. Rain had begun again. Of course it had. Emily stepped beneath the stone archway and wrapped her arms around herself. "You continue to make poor decisions regarding weather." She froze. Adrian stood behind her. Emily turned slowly. "Your Highness." He held something in one hand. Her brown coat. Clean. Carefully folded. Emily stared at it. "You kept it. You left it in my library. I thought you were asleep." "I know." Adrian extended the coat. Emily accepted it, their fingers stopping less than an inch apart. She quickly pulled her hand back. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Do not thank me. You saved my job. You should not have needed saving." Emily looked up at him. Rain whispered against the courtyard stones. "Why did you do it?" Adrian's expression became unreadable. The same question. Different voice. "Why do you care?" He looked toward the dark windows of the castle. Victoria lied. That is not the whole answer. Adrian's silver eyes returned to her. Emily immediately regretted speaking. "I am sorry. Stop apologizing every time you tell the truth." She blinked. Adrian stepped back. "Return to your room, Emily. It is cold." She slipped into her coat. "Good night, Your Highness." Emily walked toward the servants' wing. Adrian watched her go. "Emily." She turned. For one dangerous moment, he nearly told her the truth. That he had known the sound of her footsteps for days. That he noticed when she entered a room. That 300 years of discipline were beginning to feel strangely fragile around one human maid. Instead, Adrian said, "Stay away from the West Library tomorrow night." Emily frowned. "Why?" Adrian looked at the distant windows of the forbidden room. "Because I intend to be there." Then he walked away, leaving Emily beneath the archway with one unsettling thought. Prince Adrian Blackwood had just warned her to stay away, and somehow, it had sounded almost as if he were afraid she might listen. Emily stayed away from the West Library for exactly one night. On the second night, at 12:14 in the morning, she stood outside the forbidden door holding a cup of tea she was almost certain Prince Adrian would never drink. She told herself she was there because Mrs. Whitmore had asked her to check the upper halls. That was true. She told herself the tea was left over from the servants' kitchen. Also true. She did not ask herself why she had added honey after remembering Adrian never touched the sugar bowl in the dining room. Emily opened the door. Adrian sat in the same black chair beside the dead fireplace. His silver eyes found her immediately. "I told you to stay away." Emily lifted the cup. "I am bad at following unreasonable instructions." Adrian stared at her. "Most humans are afraid of me. Most humans probably have better jobs." For 2 seconds, there was silence. Then the corner of Adrian's mouth moved. Almost a smile. Emily crossed the room and placed the tea on the small table beside him. "You do understand that I do not require tea?" "Yes." "Then why bring it?" Emily looked at the dark fireplace. "Because sitting alone in a cold room seems less miserable when there is something warm nearby." Adrian's expression changed. Barely. But Emily noticed. She turned toward the door. "Good night, Your Highness." "Stay." The word stopped her. Adrian appeared equally surprised that he had spoken it. Emily slowly faced him. "For how long?" Adrian looked at the untouched tea. I do not know. So Emily sat in a chair 6 feet away. They said nothing. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Rain touched the windows in soft, uneven rhythms. Emily folded her hands in her lap. Adrian listened to her heartbeat. Steady now. No fear. It had been 200 years since anyone had shared silence with him without wanting to fill it with praise, strategy, or requests. After 20 minutes, Emily stood. Good night. Adrian nodded. The following night, she returned. Chamomile tea this time. She sat 7 feet away and repaired a loose button on her uniform. Adrian read an ancient history book without turning a page for 11 minutes. On the 5th night, Emily brought no tea. She simply sat down. On the 8th, Adrian finally spoke. My brother died in this room. Emily's hands stopped over a torn pillowcase she was sewing. Adrian stared at the dead fireplace. His name was Julian. Emily waited. She did not say she was sorry. She did not offer the empty promises humans often used against grief. Adrian continued. 200 years ago, I asked him to attend a royal meeting in my place. I believed my responsibilities were more important elsewhere. His voice remained calm, but his fingers tightened against the book. He never returned home. Emily looked at him quietly. That is why you sit here. Adrian's silver eyes moved toward her. Every night. For 200 years? Yes. Emily lowered the pillowcase. That sounds exhausting. Adrian almost laughed. I am a vampire. I do not tire as humans do. I was not talking about your body. Silence struck the room. Adrian looked away first. No one spoke to him this way. Not his father. Not Sebastian. Certainly not the nobles who measured every sentence before approaching the heir to Blackthorne. Emily rose and walked toward the cold fireplace. What are you doing? Adrian asked. Something unreasonable. She arranged several pieces of wood from the basket nearby and lit the fire. Orange light slowly filled the room. Adrian stood. Emily. You can tell me to leave. She turned toward him. But I think you have punished yourself long enough. Adrian's face became still. You know nothing about what I deserve. Emily held his gaze. Maybe not. The fire crackled between them. But Julian was your brother. If you loved him, I doubt he would want his memory to become the coldest room in this castle. Adrian did not move. Emily's courage vanished as quickly as it had arrived. I should go. She hurried toward the door. Emily. Her hand stopped on the handle. Leave the fire. She looked back. Adrian had returned to his chair, but his eyes were fixed on the flames. Emily nodded and quietly left. The next night, she returned at 12:14. The fire was already burning. Her chair waited 6 feet from Adrian's. And beside it sat a fresh cup of tea with honey. The tea was still warm when Emily entered the West Library, and that frightened her more than the cold ever had. Adrian sat beside the fire with an open book in his hands, pretending to read. Her chair waited exactly 6 feet from his. The cup rested beside it. 1 spoonful of honey. Emily looked from the tea to the vampire prince. You remembered. Adrian turned a page. I remember everything. That sounds inconvenient. Frequently. Emily sat down. She wrapped both hands around the cup and tried not to smile. Adrian noticed anyway. For 13 nights, this became their quiet ritual. Midnight. Firelight. Tea. Sometimes Emily spoke about the village. The bakery beneath her rented room. The old heater that complained louder than it worked. The father who had left behind more debts than possessions. Sometimes Adrian told her fragments of centuries she had only seen in history books. He never boasted. He spoke like a man describing whether he had survived. Then, on the 14th morning, Emily received a summons from the Vampire King. King Marcus Blackwood waited in a private chamber overlooking the northern mountains. He was taller than Adrian, with silver hair and the same unnaturally pale face. His eyes were dark red. Ancient. Measuring. "Emily Carter," he said. "Sit." Emily sat. Marcus remained standing. "My son has rejected 7 vampire princesses." Emily blinked. Of all the things she had expected, that was not one of them. "I am sorry?" 7. 3 duchesses. 2 royal heirs. 1 woman whose family owns half the supernatural banks in Europe. Marcus looked directly at her. "Yet Adrian knows what time you finish cleaning." Emily's heartbeat stumbled. Marcus heard it. "Your Majesty, I do not understand." "Do not insult either of us." His voice was not cruel. That somehow made it worse. Adrian has ruled his emotions with greater discipline than most kings rule nations. "Then you arrived." Emily stared at her hands. "We drink tea." "Adrian does not drink tea." "I know. He orders it prepared before you arrive." Emily stopped breathing for 1 second. Marcus walked toward the window. "Lady Victoria Ravenscroft is not merely a noblewoman. Her family controls one of the 5 great vampire houses. Adrian's marriage to her has been discussed for 70 years. Emily felt something cold settle beneath her ribs. "They are engaged?" "Not formally." Marcus paused. "Not yet." The fire in the chamber shifted softly. Emily thought of the West Library. Her chair. The cup with honey. Adrian waiting before midnight. Suddenly, every small moment felt dangerous. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Marcus turned. For the first time, the Vampire King's expression held something almost human. "Concern. Because my son is beginning to look at you before he looks at the door." Emily said nothing. In court, Adrian always knows every exit. Every threat. Every political movement. "Last night, during a council meeting, you crossed the courtyard below the window." Marcus stepped closer. "My son lost track of a conversation involving 3 kingdoms." Emily's fingers tightened together. "That does not mean anything. I have known Adrian for 317 years. Marcus's voice softened. "It means everything." Emily stood. "I never asked him for anything." "I know. I do not want his title. I do not want money." "I know that too." "Then what do you want from me?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. "I want you to understand the cost of staying." Emily's heart beat harder. If Adrian chooses Victoria, 5 houses remain united. If he refuses her, alliances built over generations may fracture. And if the court believes he refused because of you, they will never see Emily Carter, the woman who brought tea to a lonely room. His dark red eyes held hers. They will see the human weakness of a future king. Emily left the chamber 20 minutes later. That night, at 12:14, Adrian waited beside the fire. 12:20 passed. Then 12:30. The tea grew cold. At 1 in the morning, Adrian closed his book. At 2, he stood by the window. At 3, the fire began to fade. Emily never came. On her chair rested a single blue thread from the uniform she had repaired weeks earlier. Adrian picked it up slowly. For the first time in 200 years, the West Library felt colder with a fire burning than it ever had in darkness. Emily resigned from Blackthorne Castle before sunrise, and the first person to discover it was not Adrian. Mrs. Whitmore found the folded uniform on Emily's narrow bed at 6:15 in the morning. The room had been emptied with painful efficiency. 2 dresses gone. 3 books gone. The cracked photograph of Emily and her father gone. On the pillow rested a short letter thanking the household for 11 days of employment. By 6:20, Mrs. Whitmore was running through the eastern corridor. By 6:23, Lord Sebastian had the letter. By 6:25, Adrian knew. Where is she? His voice was quiet. Sebastian stood inside the West Library, watching the fire burn behind the prince. She left through the servants' gate at 4:40 this morning. Adrian did not move. Why was I not informed? Because servants are permitted to resign. Adrian's silver eyes lifted. Sebastian immediately regretted the answer. Find her. Your Highness. Find her. I already know where she is. Silence. Adrian turned. Sebastian placed another folded piece of paper on the table. Mrs. Whitmore found this beneath Emily's teacup. Adrian recognized Emily's handwriting before touching it. His fingers unfolded the note. You do not owe me a kingdom. You only owe yourself an honest life. Adrian read the words once. Then again. Then a third time. The room changed. The candles trembled. The fire bent beneath an invisible pressure. Across Blackthorne Castle, vampires stopped mid-conversation as ancient power moved through the stone like a winter wind. Sebastian remained still. Adrian. She left. Yes. Without asking for money. Yes. Without asking me to stop her. Sebastian watched understanding arrive slowly in the prince's pale face. Yes. Adrian looked at Emily's empty chair. 317 years of life had taught him how to recognize manipulation. People threatened to leave because they wanted to be chased. They cried because they wanted mercy. They offered kindness because they expected favor. Emily had done none of those things. She had simply walked away. Adrian crossed the room and lifted the brown coat from the back of her chair. She had left it there the previous evening. The same coat she had once placed over his shoulders. She needs this, he said. Sebastian looked toward the rain striking the windows. Probably. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Why did no one take it to her? Because I wanted to see how long it would take you to notice. Adrian stared at him. Sebastian cleared his throat. I will prepare a carriage. No. Adrian folded the coat over his arm. I am not going after her. Sebastian said nothing. Adrian walked toward the door. I am returning her property. Of course. Nothing more. Naturally. Adrian stopped. Your agreement is irritating. 300 years of service has taught me when silence would be dishonest. Adrian left without another word. Emily spent that morning in her small room above the village bakery, calculating how many weeks she could survive. Rent was due in 9 days. She had $43 in cash after receiving her final wages. The bakery owner might need help downstairs. The inn near the train station sometimes hired servers. She would manage. She always managed. At noon, Emily found the brown coat missing from her bag and remembered where she had left it. Her chest tightened. It is only a coat, she whispered. The words sounded false in the empty room. She thought of Adrian beside the fire. The tea waiting for her. His silver eyes when he spoke about Julian. Emily pressed both hands against the kitchen table. King Marcus had been right. Staying would cost too much. Not money. Something worse. Hope. 3 miles away, Blackthorne Castle prepared for the official announcement of Adrian's future engagement to Lady Victoria. 5 vampire houses had arrived before sunset. Victoria wore silver. King Marcus sat beside the royal throne. But Adrian's chair remained empty. Where is your son? Victoria asked. Marcus looked toward the great doors. For the first time in his life, the Vampire King said slowly, "I genuinely do not know." At that exact moment, someone knocked on Emily's door. She wiped her hands on her skirt and crossed the room. "Coming." She opened the door. Prince Adrian Blackwood stood in the narrow hallway. No guards. No royal coat. No carriage waiting outside. Rain darkened his black hair, and his unnaturally pale face looked almost white beneath the weak hallway light. In one hand, he held Emily's worn brown coat. "You forgot this," he said. Emily stared at him. "I left it." Adrian's silver eyes held hers. "I know." For one breath, neither moved. Then Emily noticed something behind Adrian. A faint mark carved into the wooden frame above her door. Adrian followed her gaze. His expression changed instantly. The softness disappeared. His face became perfectly still. He reached toward the symbol without touching it. A circle. 3 stars. A crescent divided by a vertical line. Emily had seen it every day since renting the room. She had never questioned it. Adrian had. "Emily," he whispered. She looked at him. For the first time since meeting the vampire prince, she saw something colder than anger in his eyes. Recognition. "Who was your mother?" Emily looked from Adrian to the symbol above her door and felt the hallway become strangely smaller. "My mother was Sarah Carter." Adrian did not blink. "Her name before she married your father." Emily hesitated. "I do not know." The answer seemed to trouble him more. Adrian finally touched the carved circle with 2 fingers. His silver eyes darkened. "This mark belonged to the House of Astor." "Is that a vampire family?" "No." His voice was quiet. "Human." Emily almost laughed from confusion. "Then why are you looking at it like the world is ending?" Adrian lowered his hand. "Because the House of Astor disappeared 600 years ago." Rain tapped against the narrow window at the end of the hallway. Emily folded her arms. "My mother worked at a public library in Ohio. She made terrible coffee and collected grocery coupons." "I think you have the wrong person." Adrian studied her face. Brown eyes. Chestnut hair. Human warmth. Nothing about Emily suggested an ancient bloodline. Then again, nothing about her had made sense since the first night she entered his library. "May I come inside?" he asked. Emily stared at him. "You are asking permission?" "It is your home." Something in her expression softened. "Come in." Adrian stepped into a room barely larger than one of Blackthorne's storage closets. A small kitchen. A narrow table. 2 chairs. Books stacked beside a second-hand couch. He could cross the entire space in 12 steps. Yet everywhere he looked, he saw Emily. A chipped blue mug. A jar filled with loose change. A photograph resting near the window. Adrian moved toward it. Emily stood beside him. "That is my mother." The photograph showed a younger Emily between her parents at a county fair. Adrian focused on Sarah Carter. His entire body went still. "What?" Emily asked. Adrian lifted the photograph closer to the light. Around Sarah's neck hung a small silver pendant. A circle. 3 stars. A divided crescent. "Emily." His voice changed. "Where is this necklace?" She looked at the photograph. "I have it." Adrian turned. Emily crossed to a drawer and removed a small wooden box. Inside lay the pendant. The moment Adrian saw it, centuries of forgotten history returned with perfect clarity. The Astor humans had once served as neutral witnesses between vampire houses. They could enter royal courts without belonging to any throne. Kings trusted their judgment because the Astors could not be influenced by vampire authority. Then, 6 centuries ago, they vanished. Adrian had believed the bloodline extinct. Your mother never explained this, he asked. She died when I was 12. Emily's voice softened. She told me the necklace belonged to her family. That was all. Adrian looked at her. Suddenly, King Marcus's warning felt incomplete. The 5 houses were gathering at Blackthorne. Victoria's family expected an engagement. And Emily Carter, without knowing it, carried the symbol of a human house that had once held the power to challenge royal decisions. You need to come with me. Emily's expression closed immediately. No. Adrian blinked. No. I left Blackthorne this morning. This is different. Everything is different with you, Adrian. It was the first time she had used his name without his title. He heard it. Felt it. Emily continued. You appear at my door. You ask about my mother. Now you want me to return to the castle because of a necklace? Because you may be in danger. From whom? Adrian was silent. Emily shook her head. Exactly. She reached for the pendant, but Adrian gently closed the wooden box before she could lift it. 5 vampire houses are inside Blackthorne tonight. His voice was low. If one of them recognizes this symbol before I understand why it is here, I cannot predict what they will do. Emily stared at him. You are frightening me. Adrian immediately released the box. I know. Is that supposed to make me trust you? No. He stepped back. This is. Adrian placed her brown coat on the table. Then he removed the black ring bearing the Blackthorne royal crest from his hand and set it beside the coat. Emily's eyes widened. What are you doing? That ring has carried my authority for 3 centuries. Without it, I cannot issue a royal command outside the castle. Adrian looked directly at her. I am not ordering you to return. Emily glanced at the ring. Then what are you doing? For once, the vampire prince had no strategy. No carefully prepared words. I am asking. Silence. Emily's heartbeat filled his hearing. Why, she whispered. Adrian thought of the cold tea. The empty chair. The blue thread between his fingers. He had crossed 3 miles in the rain while 5 royal houses waited for him. The answer had become impossible to hide. Because when you left this morning, Blackthorne became a castle again. Emily frowned. Adrian's pale face softened. Before you, I never realized how empty that was. Neither of them noticed the shadow moving past the window downstairs. Neither heard the carriage stop across the street. But inside it, Lady Victoria Ravenscroft stared up at Emily's apartment. And in her hand was an ancient book open to the symbol of the House of Astor. Emily Carter had spent her entire life believing she was ordinary, and within 1 hour, 5 ancient vampire houses would learn how wrong she was. Adrian stood in her small apartment, listening to the rain while Emily stared at the royal ring on her kitchen table. If I return, she said, I return because I choose to. Yes. I am not your servant. Adrian's silver eyes held hers. Not anymore. Emily placed the Astor pendant around her neck and slipped into her brown coat. Neither noticed the dark carriage leaving the street before them. 40 minutes later, the gates of Blackthorne Castle opened. Emily stepped from Adrian's car and immediately felt the difference. Servants stopped. Guards stared. Lord Sebastian descended the front steps with an expression caught between relief and alarm. Your Highness, he said. The council has been waiting for 2 hours. Adrian walked past him. They can wait longer. Unfortunately, Lady Victoria has already begun speaking. Adrian stopped. Emily saw his face change. About what? Sebastian looked at her pendant. Her. The great hall was filled when Adrian and Emily entered. 5 vampire houses occupied the long council tables. King Marcus sat beneath the Blackthorne crest. Lady Victoria stood in the center of the room with an ancient book open before her. Every eye turned toward Emily. Then someone saw the pendant. A whisper moved through the hall. Aster. Another voice followed. Impossible. Emily's heartbeat raced. Adrian stepped closer to her, but she did not hide behind him. Victoria smiled. How convenient. The missing human bloodline appears just as Prince Adrian prepares to announce his engagement. There will be no engagement announcement, Adrian said. Silence fell. King Marcus slowly stood. Adrian. I have allowed this court to plan my future for 70 years. Adrian walked toward the center of the hall. Tonight, that ends. Victoria's expression hardened. You would insult 5 houses for a maid? Adrian looked at Emily. She wore a second-hand coat. Her shoes were still damp from the rain. She looked completely out of place among centuries of wealth. Yet she stood straighter than half the nobles in the room. Adrian removed the brown coat from her shoulders and carried it to the council table. He placed it beside Victoria's ancient book. Confusion spread through the hall. For 3 centuries, Adrian said, everyone who approached me wanted something. Land. Protection. Influence. A title. His fingers rested on the faded fabric. Emily Carter entered a forbidden room believing I was asleep. She gave me the only coat she owned and walked home in the rain. Emily stared at him. Adrian continued. She fed servants when she could barely afford food. She defended people who could offer her nothing. Then, when she believed her presence might damage this kingdom, she left without asking me to choose her. Victoria laughed softly. How touching. Adrian turned toward her. Yes. It was. The simple answer silenced her. Adrian faced the 5 houses. I will not marry Lady Victoria. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Marcus raised one hand, and silence returned. Then you understand the political consequences, the king said. I do. And you accept them? Adrian looked at Emily. I do. Emily's breath caught. Victoria closed the ancient book. You are making this decision because you love her. Adrian went still. There it was. The truth he had avoided in every corridor, every midnight conversation, every cold cup of tea. Emily looked at him, frightened now for an entirely different reason. Adrian crossed the distance between them. He stopped several feet away. Emily. She swallowed. You do not owe me a kingdom, she whispered. I know. You do not owe me anything. I know that too. Adrian's pale face softened. That is why this is the first choice in centuries that feels entirely mine. Emily's eyes filled with quiet emotion. Adrian did not touch her. He simply stood before her, allowing her the space to leave again if she wished. She did not. Then the Aster pendant began to glow. A soft white light spread across Emily's chest. Every vampire in the hall froze. King Marcus descended from the throne. Victoria's face lost all color. The ancient book on the council table opened by itself, its pages turning until they stopped on a single faded image. Emily looked at the drawing. A human woman wearing her pendant stood beside a vampire prince beneath the Blackthorne crest. Below them were 5 words. Marcus read them aloud. When Aster returns, crowns change. Emily slowly looked at Adrian. What does that mean? Before he could answer, every bell in Blackthorne Castle began to ring. Not the dinner bells. Not the council bells. The ancient royal bells that had remained silent for 600 years. Adrian stared at Emily as the sound rolled through the mountains. He had thought falling in love with a human maid was the greatest danger to his future. He had been wrong. Emily Carter had not entered Blackthorne Castle to become part of his kingdom. Somehow, without knowing it, she had returned to change it.